Hi, my name is John Lai with Clive Capital, and today we have a special guest. We have Chris Tanner, and Chris Tanner comes from New Direction Trust Company, and he's going to talk to us about getting started with self-directed retirement plans. And so you might have heard of SDIRAs in the past, but he's going to talk about all the great things you could do with self-directed retirement plans, the alternative investments that you can make in those plans, and also some of the limitations. So with that, Chris, I know you've been with New Direction Trust Company for quite a bit some time now. Do you want to give a little bit of background on your experiences and how you got started?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me, John. I appreciate the opportunity. So, I've been with New Direction Trust for about 4.5 years. My official title is Senior Sales and Education Director. So, about half my time is spent doing what we're doing right now, just educating people. So, I give webinars and I teach CE classes all over the country, actually. And then the other part of the time, I'm actually in the office, working with new clients. And my background is an interesting one. It's kind of the reverse. I started out more as a client than working for one of these companies. So in 2006, I opened up my first self-directed retirement plan. And in 2013, I actually started a company that I ran for 5 years where we specialized in solo 401ks, which is also a type of self-directed retirement plan. And then I kind of joined forces with New Direction Trust. They were a bigger company, so I've been with them, since that time. So, John, I've been using these types of plans since 2006. So I actually started out as just somebody who was using these plans and loved the benefits that come with them, and loved it so much I ended up it's kind of become my career. And so, just a little background on me.
That's great. Thank you for that.
So I guess I'll go ahead and jump in. And the attorneys make me start with a disclaimer. So we have to do this with all of our presentations. At the end of the day, this is really meant to be educational. We don't offer any legal advice, no tax advice, and no financial advice. So New Direction Trust, like pretty much all the self-directed custodians, are neutral when it comes to the actual investments. And we'll be talking about those in a little bit. So what that means is we don't actually offer any investments. We don't have securities licenses, so we don't provide any financial advice. We're really just a vehicle. And so think of us like an Uber. We're just getting somebody from point A to point B, providing them a different way to get their retirement funds into different types of investments. And I always like to start off these presentations by talking about two benefits. And what I mean by that is most of the time when people listen to something like this, they're thinking about themselves. But to your point, John, in your business, this could apply to your business or other people you know. So the things we're talking about could possibly apply to you, but even if it doesn't apply to you, there is a ton of capital out there in US based retirement plans, something along the lines of $30 trillion. That number was closer to 35 trillion at the beginning of 2022, but that's obviously gone down a bit. I'd say roughly 20% or so. But there is a lot of capital out there sitting in retirement plans. And we'll talk a little bit about the fact that there's not a lot of people who are aware of some of the possibilities that a self-directed IRA provides. And so we're going to just start very, very basic. And many of you listening may have heard of the term self-directed IRA. And the first thing I'd like to point out is that it's actually a marketing term. So when you see the word self-directed, it's not actually a type of IRA. It's just an indication of the kind of IRA that will allow you to invest in alternative assets. And so I bring that up because some of the big financial firms have caught on to this idea of the word self-directed. And so it's not uncommon that I'll get a phone call and somebody will be with one of the big investment firms. We could name names, but we know who they are. And they'll say, I already have a self-directed account. I'm managing my own IRA. What's the difference between what you do and what I already have? And it's really pretty straightforward. If you have most traditional retirement plans, you have the ability to invest in publicly traded securities. And so that includes stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, things like that. And that's it. If it's not a publicly traded security, for the most part, you cannot invest in it. And so we'll talk a little bit about the other types of investments that a true self-directed IRA can allow you to invest in. But the key thing is that when you hear self-directed IRA, just make sure that the custodian you're looking at, if it happens to be New Direction Trust, they'll allow you to invest in that asset that you want.
Hey,
And
Chris,
so, yeah,
can I pause really quickly? There is a floating toolbar that's blocking part of your presentation. So, do you see that? If
I
you could
do.
hide it.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. I didn't know if you were seeing that. How's
Oh yeah, no worries. I'll cut this part out, but go ahead.
yeah. It's one of the common questions I get anytime I do this presentation. It's pretty common that this is the first time they've heard about this, or maybe they've heard a little bit about this, but they haven't heard very much about it. And the question is, well, why haven't I heard about self-directed IRAs? And so I'll give you kind of a generic answer and then a more specific answer. But what's interesting is that IRA plans have been around since the mid 70s. And at the time they were instituted, big financial institutions understood that this was a way that they could get their hands into retirement accounts for just common Americans. So remember that prior to the mid 70s, IRAs and 401ks and a lot of the retirement plans we're familiar with didn't even exist. So people had pension plans, meaning that their business, or if they worked for the government, they took care of their retirement. And so what happened in the 70s is we switched who gets to take care of the retirement over to the employees, essentially. And so the big financial institutions have no interest whatsoever in educating you or telling you about self-directed retirement plans, because the assets that you can invest in, they cannot offer. And as a result, there's no need. They really don't want you to hear about this, because if you decide that you do want to self-direct, you're taking money away from them, and obviously what they can charge you, their fees, et cetera, go down. So there's no incentive whatsoever for most financial planners, most of what I would call the Wall Street-based type retirement plans, to give you any inclination or any education that this is something that you can do. And so that's all we're really here today, is just to let you know about the possibilities. And so just to give you kind of a feel of some of the things that an IRA can invest in, and I'm actually going to start and work backwards. And a lot of times people say, well, what can I invest in? And it's almost easier to tell you what you cannot invest in. And so the two categories of investments that you cannot invest in are life insurance and collectibles. So what that means is there's an awful lot of things that you can invest in. And so just a few examples. Our clients invest in precious metals. And when I say precious metals, they're buying the physical gold and silver. You can also invest in platinum and palladium, but mostly it's gold and silver. Uh, we have people that invest in oil and gas royalties. Folks invest in real estate. So you see the for rent sign there. We have a lot of account holders that own real estate in their retirement accounts. You can invest in private companies. And so it could be something like a pre-IPO, company that's wanting to go public, or it could be something as small as a small mom and pop type business in your local community. And then where you see the two hands and money being exchanged, something we see quite a bit of is that you can actually lend money from your IRA and just think of it as being the bank. And so We see quite a bit of that, as a matter of fact. And so remember back at the beginning, we said think about two hats. Some of you, may be thinking, how do I access capital? And I talk to a lot of real estate investors. And I will just tell you there is a lot of capital, and right now in 2022, there are a lot of people looking for an alternative to the stock market. And so I like to do just a little bit of a focus on real estate investments. And the idea here is to understand that when we say you can invest in real estate, that's a really broad category. And so you can see the type of real estate doesn't really matter. So whether it's a single family or multifamily, could be commercial, things like condominiums, apartments, raw land. You can invest in mortgages, lease options. The property doesn't even have to be in the United States. You can invest in other countries. And so the real estate could be leveraged or unleveraged. So meaning that you can put a down payment on a property or some type of real estate and use bank financing. So the takeaway that I like people to have is it's almost unlimited what you can invest in. Really, if you can dream of it, there's a really good chance that you'd be able to invest in it. And I do like to point out that we use the term self-directed IRA, and that's a very generic term. And the reason I like to share this slide is that there's quite a few different types of accounts that you can actually quote unquote self-direct. So we have employer accounts like the simple and SEP IRAs, and we also offer a pretty cool plan called a solo 401k. So those are retirement plans that are based on there being a business. So you could be a sole proprietor, or you could have a formal incorporated business, but you're absolutely eligible for those types of accounts. And then, of course, there are individual accounts like traditional Roth IRAs, and then, believe it or not, even health savings accounts follow under the same rules as IRAs. And so, obviously, with IRA plans, the idea is you're putting money aside, and we're kind of waiting for that to come into retirement, right? So you're putting money away with the hopes that during retirement, this money is coming back to you. Part of the reason I put this slide up here is that it's important to understand that when you're investing with your IRA, it is actually a separate legal entity from you as an individual. And we're going to talk in a little bit about the idea that you want to keep kind of an arm's length transactions between you and your IRA. So very generically speaking, we'll have someone ask, well, how can an IRA participate in these different kinds of investments? And so an IRA can actually own things. And so it can literally buy a house and be on title. An IRA can literally own a business. It can be the member, the owner of a particular business. And so I always tell people, whatever county you happen to live in, if you went to the county assessor's search feature and you look up properties, if you type up a keyword like just IRA, I could almost guarantee you that in every county, and barring some really remote rural type counties, you'll find that there are properties owned by IRAs. So when you see the word IRA in the title, you know that somebody used their retirement funds to buy that property. Another cool way that an IRA can participate is to partner. And what's interesting about this is that there are very few limitations on how an IRA can partner. So for example, one IRA can partner with another IRA. Your IRA could partner with yourself, believe it or not. Your IRA could partner with a friend, a family member, a business partner. And so this is a great option when you don't maybe have enough funds to take care of an entire deal. Well, let's put funds together. And John, I'm guessing that that's part of what you do in your business.
That is partially what I do. Yes, a lot of it is leverage, but a lot of it is partnerships as well.
Yeah, and so that it is a great way to invest. The IRA can also be the lender, and so I just like to think of this as the IRA is like a bank. You know, it is a source of capital, it is a source of funds, and that IRA can also be an equity participant. And so all that means is it can, whether formally or informally, be involved with a business, and it can own equity in a business. So one of the things I think is important to know is that the rules with retirement plans and investing are a little bit different than when you're working with your own personal money. And so, as a general rule of thumb, your IRA or your self-directed account, uh, you have to be aware of what's known as disqualified persons, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, and then the concept of self-dealing. And we'll give some specific examples of that here in a bit. The reason I just think this is important is we get a lot of phone calls, and when people aren't aware that there are some rules around this, we have to do some education, and sometimes things they think they would like to do, they find they are not able to do. I'll give some examples of that here in a bit. I just wanted to share this idea of disqualified persons. And so a disqualified person, think of your blood relatives. Uh, you yourself are a disqualified person, your spouse, and then your blood descendants, mom, dad, your grandma, your grandfather, and then the other direction, sons, daughters, sons-in-laws. More distant relatives are not disqualified. And we'll give some examples of where this might come into play. But one thing it's important to be aware of is something called a prohibited transaction. So the IRS has some clear rules that essentially they're saying if you're going to use your retirement funds to do these types of investments, here are the rules. And so one of the rules is you cannot buy or sell something from your IRA. So let me give you an example. And John, this is a common one. Somebody will call up, they hear about a self-directed IRA, and they'll call up and say, Chris, I have a property, a rental property that I already own. I own it in an LLC, and man, I would love to put that in my Roth IRA. Can my Roth IRA buy that rental property that I already own? And unfortunately, the answer is no. And the reason the IRS puts that in place is they don't want any of those quote unquote sweetheart deals. And so they prohibit it. And so if you already own something outside of the IRA, you can never bring it in and own that inside the IRA or vice versa. So just keep that in mind. If you're starting up a new self-directed IRA, you're going to have to start with a new investment. You can't work on investments you've already got. So you cannot lend money or extend credit to the IRA. And I think that one's pretty straightforward. And you cannot be personally compensated. So you cannot be paid as a result of an investment that your IRA is involved with. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. My wife happens to be a real estate agent, and we have bought and sold properties from within our retirement accounts, and she's represented us. So she's written contracts, made offers, and she's listed properties as well. We've bought and sold from within our retirement accounts. But because she's a real estate agent, she cannot be paid. So she cannot receive a commission for those deals involving either her retirement or my retirement plan. So just keep that in mind. If your IRA invests in a business and it's a business that you happen to be personally involved in, you wouldn't be able to be paid in that business personally. So just something to keep in mind. And this one applies quite often in real estate, but you cannot provide services for the IRA. And so where this one comes up is when people buy real estate, you are not allowed to be in there providing any physical labor. So you can't be in a house, swinging a hammer, ripping out carpet, doing things like that. But you can provide the intellectual management. So you can absolutely pick things that are going into the house. If it's a rental property, you can serve the role of property manager. If you're just doing the intellectual part, can't be in there fixing toilets or changing light bulbs or anything like that, but you can absolutely advertise for tenants. You can do background checks, you can direct payments of those rents back to the IRA, but the IRS does draw a line there for providing physical services.
Is that one primarily because you're compensated for it? Can you not be compensated but still provide the services?
It's a good question. So you cannot be compensated. And then what the IRS is saying is that you're providing a value to the IRA by, like, let's say you go in and you do all the demo work, that there's a value to that. And you essentially you're saving money. And so they just draw the line and say, you know what, you can't be in there doing any of the physical labor on real
Got
estate.
it. Okay.
Nor can you be paid. And
Right.
this one here, this was a common one that we get. Our company happens to be located in Colorado, and so we have ski resorts. And a pretty common call we get is, they'll call up, they'll say, Chris, I found this property. It's up in Vail or Aspen or Breckenridge, one of our ski resorts here, and I'd love to buy it with my IRA. And I say, that's great. You can do that. And then the next question they ask is, well, I love to ski and I love to get up there, a couple weeks a year or whatever, and I'd love to use this property. And that's when I have to tell them the bad news, and that is that you cannot personally use any property or anything that your IRA owns. And that also extends to those that, remember that list of folks that we did earlier, those disqualified persons. And so this is really truly meant to be a separate investment that you're not personally using, that you're not personally doing work on. It's really intended to be an arm's length type investment. And so keep in mind that your IRA and you are two separate legal entities, and you have a different tax status than your IRA. And so your IRA is either a tax deferred account where you did not pay the taxes on the money going in, or it's a Roth type account where you did pay the taxes, and you as an individual are a taxable entity. And so the idea here is that when you invest with that IRA, the IRA is responsible for the expenses and the income. And so you cannot pay expenses for investments that your IRA is involved in. So for example, if you buy a rental property and let's say the AC unit goes out or something like that, you can't pull out your credit card and pay for that expense from your personal account. You have to pay from the IRA, and the same for the income. When rents are coming in, whether it's from a long-term rental or an Airbnb, those rents do need to go back into the IRA. You don't want to take a collection of those rents personally. And so, very common question is, for people kind of hear about the idea of self-direction, and they kind of get the idea that, okay, I can invest in things outside of the stock market. And then it becomes a little bit bigger question of, well, why would I do that? And in my opinion, one of the reasons that you would look into self-directing is the concept of control. And when you buy a stock, for the most part, the control you have is picking the stock, deciding when you want to buy or when you want to sell. But when it comes to the performance of the stock, you don't have personal control, unless you're, a CEO of a company, and that would almost be like insider trading. For the most part, most of us have zero control over those investments. We're really at the whim of either that particular stock or the market itself. So one of the ways that I feel blessed, I opened up an account back in 2006 that I self-direct. One of the things I've invested in is real estate, and you have a much higher degree of control. I can pick what city I want to invest in. I can pick what neighborhood. I can pick the street. And then in addition to that, I can decide, do I want to fix this property up, put some money into it, or do I want to just leave it as is? I get to decide what the rents are. I get to screen the tenants. I have a lot more control over the performance of the actual investment. Whereas I think with things like stocks and bonds and mutual funds, we're pretty much on a ride. We don't personally control the performance. The other thing is that I think it provides you with some freedom to go after some unique opportunities. And one of the things I love about this is, some of the things that I invest in are what I call non-correlated assets. And what's scary to me is that over 97% of Americans have their retirement funds in one asset category, and that's publicly traded securities. They're in the market for all intents and purposes. One of the investments I do is something called tax lien certificates. And a tax lien certificate, without getting into a lot of detail, has absolutely no correlation to how the stock market is performing. And as a matter of fact, they tend to do better when the market's not doing well, but they have zero correlation to the performance of the market. The state determines the interest rate on something like a tax lien certificate. And in that investment, I feel blessed because I either get paid a guaranteed rate of return on the interest, or I have an opportunity to foreclose on a property. And so I have the freedom to invest in something like that, which you don't get with most standard retirement plans. I happen to be a huge believer in tax-free growth. And think Roth type accounts. So you can have a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. But we are historically in a very low tax brackets right now as Americans. Historically, if you were to look over the last 100 years, we have had much, much, much higher taxes. And the reason I think this Roth is so powerful is we're kind of guessing when it comes time to pull money out of these accounts later on in life. And one of the things we don't know and we have no control over is what will the tax brackets and tax rates be when we get to retirement. And I like taking the guesswork out of that by investing through Roth accounts where I don't even have to worry about what is the tax rate in the future. And I would not be one bit surprised if we have to raise taxes. And regardless of which side of the political coin you're on, we have some huge obligations here in the United States. Our biggest obligations are to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the military. And what's scary about that is that's 97% of our federal budget, those categories right there. And right now we're in an increasing, our interest rates are being increased, right? The feds are increasing them. That means the interest on our debt, which is absolutely, it's unbelievable right now. But the government, we're hurting as a country. We have a ton of debt and we're going to have to pay way more interest on that debt. And so that's one of the reasons we're seeing inflation. And I would not be a bit surprised if we see taxes go up. And sometimes they're hidden taxes, but I'll kind of get off my soapbox on that one. But in general, the last thing there is just the idea of diversification. If you have all of your retirement assets in one category, publicly traded securities, for the most part, unless you're a sophisticated trader, you're at the whim of the market. When the market's doing well, your portfolio is going up, your retirement plan's growing. And in 2022, for the most part, people's retirement plans are shrinking, and because the market's going down. And so this diversification allows you to shield yourself to an extent and get into assets that are not so tightly tied to the market. And so these accounts are actually pretty easy to get going. All of our accounts are just opened online, and that's really just step one, is getting an account opened. And then we have to get money into that account. And so most people are moving funds from another type of retirement plan. So what most people are doing is they have an IRA or possibly a 401k or an old retirement plan from a job they no longer have, and they're just moving that money over into this new self-directed retirement account. Or of course, you can always make contributions into that account. And then finally, you go ahead and you make your investments. And so I'll kind of skip through that very quickly, but there's a couple of ways that money comes in. And the one thing that I wanted to point out here is that when somebody is transferring or rolling money into an IRA or possibly a 401k, we'll help direct you and do it in such a way that you're not paying any taxes. And so I know that's sometimes a fear or a concern that people have is that, well, if I move money out of this retirement account, I don't want to get taxed. I don't want any early withdrawal penalties or anything like that. And so we make sure that that's how we move those funds. And so we have ways of either transferring or rolling the money in. So there are no taxes. You're just moving it from one retirement account to another, and then you can go ahead and make your investment. So just a quick review with some of the different IRA plans. I know we're getting a little bit towards the end of the year here of some of the contribution limits that you can put into the various retirement plans. And then there are some catch-up contributions if you're over the age of 50 that apply as well. But John, with that, I wanted to just put up our contact information, our website, and our phone number. So if people have questions, would certainly encourage them to reach out, and happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
So one question I did have toward the end of the presentation, you had mentioned that you can make contributions to the account. Is it limited to old IRA and 401ks, or if I already have a 401k, can I be moving money from that 401k or IRA into a self-directed IRA account?
Yeah, that's a great question. So IRAs, and it doesn't matter what kind of IRA you have. So it could be a traditional IRA, or sometimes you'll hear them called rollover IRAs, SEP IRA, Roth IRA. Any IRA is portable. You own that account. So there's no question with IRA plans, you can move those and transfer those into a self-directed account. Where it's a little bit dependent is when you have an employer type retirement plan. So as you mentioned, John, if you have a 401k plan, the answer is maybe. And so here are the key things to keep in mind. If you have an employer type retirement plan, so it could be a 401k or a 403b, if you are younger than 59 and a half, and if you're currently employed, there's a pretty good chance that you will not have the freedom to move those funds over. However, if you're older than 59 and a half, you're technically of retirement age at that point, you have the freedom to move those funds. They cannot tell you that you're locked into the plan, so to speak. Or the other thing that we find is that if you've moved money from another employer, so let's say you had a job, you left that company, you went to a new company, and you decided to move maybe an old 401k into the new 401k, any monies from a previous employer, those can be moved. And so, John, what I tell most people is if you have an employer plan, go ahead and call that plan administrator, whoever's running that plan, because they're all a little different. They're all a little bit unique. And just ask them, hey, can I move these funds into an IRA? Do I have that freedom? And they will tell you. That's a good question.
Okay. Thank you. The other question I have was, we have a lot of real estate investors. The club we have, various clubs are real estate clubs. They are interested in investing in real estate. What I had understood about self-directed retirement plans in the past was the SDIRA itself has to have the funds to make the purchase of the real estate. Can you, it sounds like you could partner with the SDIRA can you partner with the SDIRA if you don't have enough funds in that retirement plan to actually make the acquisition, purchase an asset?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think that is a misconception that you have to have 100% of the funds to buy real estate in the IRA, and that's not true.
Right.
So, to your point, John, you can partner. Uh, and so, part of the funds can come from the IRA, and the other part of the funds really can come from just about anywhere. And without getting too much into the weeds, you can partner with yourself. You can partner with just another business partner, let's say. Uh, you could partner with another IRA. So maybe your IRA has funds, your spouse's IRA has funds. You can put those together. And then keep in mind that uh, you can leverage real estate using an IRA or a solo 401k. And so just you, in many instances, need enough for a down payment. And as long as you have enough for a down payment, you can actually borrow funds. You don't have to do a 100% cash purchase. You can definitely borrow funds and you can have a mortgage just like you would personally or as a real estate investor. And so there are definitely ways that you can get into deals without necessarily having a huge amount of money. And so we see that all the time where people merge the funds from their IRA with either another person or they partner in essence. So that's a great question.
Got it. Okay. And then if let's assume that the IRA invests in some real estate, and then later on, that IRA requires some investments. Something breaks and something needs to be bought. Something. So this is kind of a two-part question. One part is, what if you don't have enough funds in the IRA to make that purchase? And the second part is, let's assume you do have enough funds. What's the typical path of replacing something broken? Is there checkbook writing in the IRA and so on?
Yeah, that's a great question. That comes up quite a bit. Um, so when somebody sets up a self-directed IRA, there's two basic ways that they can set it up. And so I'm going to answer the checkbook question first and then work backwards. But when somebody sets up the IRA, they can set it up as a custodial account. So what a custodial account means is that the money is moved to us. We hold it in trust on behalf of the IRA, and then people direct us to invest those funds or make payments. And in that type of situation, like you're saying, if there's enough money in the account, uh, most everything nowadays is just handled online. And so I think most people are familiar with online bill pay through their bank. Our system works very similar. You go in, you go into your investment, and we literally have a button that's just called bill pay. You click the button and you tell us, how do you want to send the funds? And so it could be a check, an ACH, a wire, all of those are available. And in the not too distant future, we're actually going to have the ability to have, it's more like a virtual credit card. It won't be an actual piece of plastic. But what we're going to do is we're going to provide our clients with a virtual credit card that's tied to a specific asset. So it might be like 123 Main Street, and they literally could just use this credit card, and it works a lot like an ACH. So as long as the funds are in there, they'll be able to pay for it. And that's a little bit more instant. So if someone wants payment quickly, you just give them a credit card. So that's coming. Uh, and then the other way, of course, is you can set up these accounts so you do have checkbook control. And in that situation, there needs to be some kind of an entity. Usually it's an LLC that the IRA owns, but the LLC then indirectly is the one making the payments. And so that LLC that's owned by the IRA will literally have a bank account. And so your bank account, you can write physical checks, you can get a debit card. It's no different than any other business account. So it's really up to the individual when they set up the plan. Do I want checkbook control, or am I okay with just having the custodian, cover those fees? So the last question you had, and this was a good question. If you're buying real estate and you have a big expense, maybe a furnace goes out or something like that, and you don't have enough money in the account. What do I do? There's some options. One option is you might have money in another retirement account. So it might not be in your self-directed IRA, but maybe you have another account somewhere else. So what you can do is you can either transfer or roll some additional funds into that account. So that's one way that you can put some more money into the account. The other way is through a contribution. So assuming you're eligible, if you have like a Roth or traditional IRA, remember you can put in $6,000 a year, and that's actually going up a little bit next year to 6,500. So you could put in a contribution, and then if none of those work and your back's against the wall, you can actually, I'll just say, utilize a financial friend. And so let's just say, for instance, the furnace goes out, and John, your IRA owns that property, and you just don't have a way to pay for that furnace right now. What you could do is you could come to me and you could say, Chris, I need either a temporary loan or, I'll be able to reimburse you later. But basically, you're going to have me cover the cost or the expense of that furnace. And then later on, you're either going to make a contribution, or move some money over from another retirement plan, and then you'll repay me. Or we can come to terms on, hey, no problem, John. I'm only going to charge you 50% interest, or whatever that happens to be. But that's a couple of ways that you can put money into that account. But that's a great question.
The one of the slides you had earlier on disqualified individuals did not have brother or sister, I believe, as highlighted. Could you explain that? That seems like a blood relative, but it's outside of the definition of disqualified individuals.
Yeah, it's interesting you picked up on that because when somebody asks, well, why is that? I say, because that's how the IRS operates. I have no idea. But for whatever reason, siblings are not disqualified. So you can absolutely invest with them. You could loan money to any type of investment that you can think of. Siblings are not disqualified. Uh, but you're 100% accurate. And one of the things I like to just point out is that any company like New Direction Trust that's a custodian, a big part of our job is to educate and provide guidance in the sense of IRS rules. And so I always encourage people, just ask us. And if you're thinking about an investment, or if you're already in an investment and you want to make sure you're doing things the right way, call us. And other custodians are going to do the same thing. Just give them a call, and we'll help guide you when it comes to the rules. You don't necessarily have to be an expert, but you just need to have some good general education and knowledge.
The reason why I bring that up with the brother and sister is in regards to the question about not having enough money.
Mhm.
That seems like an obvious outlet. If you don't have, if you expended all of your retirement funds and you need to go to someone else, the brother or sister or some sibling, not your quote unquote blood relative, could potentially provide that insertion of money.
Oh,
That's interesting.
absolutely. In fact, the more distant you get, it could be an aunt, it could be an uncle or a cousin. And what's interesting is uh, if you are married, your spouse's parents are not disqualified from your IRA. So as long as your
Okay.
spouse's IRA is not involved, it's crazy how these relationships get. But yeah, you could actually ask your in-laws, and
Right.
now we have blended families. So if you have stepchildren and you haven't legally adopted them, they're not disqualified. And
Oh,
so it's
interesting.
weird how you get into these weird situations with, well, who's family and who's not, and how does that apply to these IRS rules? Uh, I would say lean on us. We're more than happy to answer, potential situations that might come up like that, or one that you're in right now.
One question I had, and doing a little bit of research on self-directed IRAs, was about real estate. It was really about leverage in real estate. So understanding that if you have any profit and you use leverage in real estate or you use leverage in any other type of, I guess, investment transaction, you may be subject to UBIT and UBIT and the unrelated debt finance income. Could you explain that a little bit? I know you didn't cover it, but if you could maybe explain it at a high level.
Yeah. And one of the things I would encourage people to do is we do have a YouTube channel. And so if you go to YouTube and search New Direction Trust, we do regular webinars. And the reason I mentioned that is I did one not too long ago about this topic specifically, John. It was just literally the webinar is called All About UBIT. And so at a high level, UBIT, which stands for Unrelated Business Income Tax, it's a tax that can come up from within the IRA. And you're correct. There's two times that UBIT can come up. One is when you're running an active trade or business. And the example I give is if somebody wanted to open a McDonald's franchise, just as an example, and they were running that through their IRA plan. What the IRS says is that's really not the intent of retirement plans, is to go buy a business. And imagine buying McDonald's with a Roth IRA and thinking, oh, all the profits are tax free to me and I can take them out tax free. And so it's sort of a loophole that the IRS is trying to close off. And so what they're saying is that you can buy McDonald's and you can run that business. However, you will be taxed. And that's where this UBIT tax comes in. So the other one, and you're right, that comes in is when you're borrowing or leveraging. And that happens quite a bit in real estate. And when UBIT comes up, there's two times that it can come up. One is what I would say is on an ongoing basis. And so in any given year, if you own real estate, whether you own it directly in the IRA or indirectly, and like a partnership or something like that, if the IRA recognizes more than $1,000 of net profit, and net being the key word, then it would be subject to UBIT. So why is net important? All the expenses and things that you can normally write off can help offset UBIT. So things like mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, depreciation, any repairs, typical expenses that come along with owning real estate, those help offset the income. And so it's only on the net profit, and the tax is only on the leveraged portion. So a simple example is if I put 30% down, 70% is leveraged, I'm never taxed on the 30% that I own, the equity that I have in the property. I'm only ever taxed on the percentage that's leveraged. The other thing that I like to bring up is that leverage UBIT applies to IRAs, but it does not apply to 401ks. And so one of the things I always like to highlight is if you are interested in investing in real estate, if you're eligible, there's a self-directed retirement plan called a solo 401k. And one of the beautiful things about this solo 401k is that it is not subject to the debt financed UBIT. So in other words, if that solo 401k goes out, borrows money, uses it to buy a property, you don't even have to worry about UBIT. It just doesn't apply in that situation, nor does it apply if it's part of a bigger group. It's like a partner in an apartment building, and they've borrowed funds to buy this apartment building. Solo 401k is a great way to go. And that's one of the reasons we like to do this education and just tell people, don't be afraid to call. Because if anyone calls me and they're telling me I'm going to invest in real estate, I'm going to ask the right questions and try to get them in the right plan, if that makes sense. So if a solo 401k is a good fit for them, we're going to push to go in that direction for what you just mentioned. We want to avoid that tax if we can.
Right. That's great. Thank you for that. My last question was about, I know these are retirement plans by definition, but a lot of, and, you can benefit from the retirement plans when you retire, but a lot of our uh, listeners are younger than the retirement age. I mean, yes, you should think long term, but are there any benefits to a self-directed IRA where you can benefit? I mean, I guess it goes back to the do's and don'ts of self-directed IRAs. Can you
Mhm.
benefit from a self-directed IRA before you actually retire?
Yeah, good question. And I get that question quite a bit. You're right. But someone that's a little bit younger and they really need the cash flow, right? Part of the reason they're wanting to invest in real estate or some of these other investments is they need the income personally. And so I get it. Investing with your retirement plan is nice, but if I can't touch the money, I still got to eat and I still have to pay bills. So there are a couple of ways that people could potentially access that. And so one of the plans, the Solo 401k, has a unique feature. And the unique feature, and some people may be familiar with this, is that you do have the ability to borrow money. And so, in an indirect way, you're borrowing from yourself, your own retirement plan, and you can borrow up to $50,000. And so, if that cash flow is something that's important to you, there is a way you can borrow it. Now, that's only in the 401k plan. You can't borrow from an IRA. But if you're eligible, it's one way that you could tap into some personal funds. Now, it is a loan and it does need to be repaid or there are tax consequences. So it's not like you just take the money out and you don't ever have to worry about it. There are some rules around that. The other one, and especially for young people, the other plan that I would highly recommend is any type of Roth plan. It could be a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA. So one of the cool things about a Roth IRA or Roth 401k is that contributions to the plan you're always able to take those out tax free because you've already paid the taxes. And so for a young person, maybe you have enough to make that contribution, and then later on, you need some of that income. Well, you take it out as a distribution, and as long as it's from the contribution and not the growth within that plan, you can take those funds out. So the Roth IRA offers a little more flexibility in that way, and in fact, it's a great way to invest for college for your kids because contributions to the plan can be taken out, and it's kind of a cool way to put money aside for college. We could almost do a whole separate category for saving for college and using them. Uh, but contributions going in, by the time they get to college, the contributions can be taken out. Any growth in the account, you just leave it alone. Uh, but for a young kid or a young person trying to get going in real estate, that's kind of an alternative way to think about, if I did need access to that cash, as long as I can get it in there to begin with, I can always pull that out if needed. So that was a long answer, John. I hope that covered that for you.
No, that was great. That was fantastic. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
I think we're about time, but thank you very much for all the great information you've imparted, Chris. This uh, webinar will be recorded, and so everyone will be able to access it thereafter. But I encourage everyone to contact Chris and the folks at New Direction Trust Company if they have any other questions about self-directed IRAs. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank
Nice
you,
speaking.
John. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.